All right, folks, I'm here. Let me start you off with this little bit so we get to understanding what we're talking about today. Like, share, subscribe, support the stream. It's going to be different today. A little different.
Divorced white female. Beautiful, statuesque blonde. Witty, cultured.
Lizzie, this is your mother. Remember me?
You should give yourself credit for a lot. You're terrific.
You know, I have five brothers, and my mother was a clerk at a grocery store. I support them. I take care of them. I don't know you. You really don't know me.
I can't figure this guy out.
I have a present for you. You can take off your dress.
What?
You can ask me to leave.
I don't want you to leave.
Does this excite you?
Yes.
I will have you. Yes, I will have you. I will find a way, and I will have you.
I like to watch you move.
Do you like it?
I will collect you.
Aren't you going to ask me how I like this?
Put them all on. It would mean a lot to me.
But I see danger
But I can't concentrate.
everywhere.
Maybe it's true love.
You're my obsession.
Is this some kind of game?
It's whatever we want it to be.
Who do you think you are? You're taking a hell of a lot for granted, aren't you?
Want me to make you sleep with me. You are an obsession. You're my obsession.
I think I've been hypnotized.
But I never felt anything like this before.
How did you know I'd respond to you the way I have?
I saw myself in you.
Mickey Rourke, Kim Basinger, 9.5 weeks.
You want me to make you sleep with me. You are an obsession. You're my obsession.
All right, folks, welcome to the Hero's Journey. So this week we're going to do something different. I promised these two people that I would do this stream with them because a good brother, Malaika, my cinephilic brother, we had a conversation on this stream about this story in this book, and he availed me of some knowledge that I had not known, meaning that this was based on a second. Let's take this off at this moment. At this moment, let's change the style up. There we go. He availed me of knowledge that this movie that you just saw the trailer for was actually a book. I had not known that. So, because I do not like to be ignorant, I chose to get the book and read the book. And Malika had a decent suggestion that we should actually review it. And I thought it would be good in the sense that most people nowadays know about 50 Shades of Grey. I've read the 50 Shades of Grey books. I read it when I was in school studying psychology. One of my classmates had it. She was into it. I read it to see what the girls was into that they was all giddy about. It wasn't that damn bad. It wasn't that much raunch. I'm reading it like an adult, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But having a conversation with Malika highlighted the fact that 50 Shades of Grey was a direct kind of ripoff of 9.5 weeks. A little different, but a ripoff of that specifically. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a comparison of the two, but to review the first one on its merits and actually read the original material, like I always tell you guys to go back and do. Read the original material, go back to the source, Neo, and then watch the movie again with fresh eyes. And that's what I did. I finished reading the book yesterday, and I finished watching the movie last night. And I didn't go for the theatrical release. I went for the uncut director's version. So I got a little bit more extra footage in there to see if it made what I remembered from the original theatrical release any better, any worse, added anything more to the story. Now, when me and Malaika had these conversations about this book, I thought it would be really interesting outside of just the two of us sitting here talking about these, what could be salacious aspects of the book, because it does involve adult relationships, adult sexual habits and appetites and different kinks and stuff like that. I thought it'd be more interesting if there was a woman involved in that situation who would actually be willing to speak on and have an adult conversation about this kind of stuff without judgment, without, trying to be gross and, titillating and stuff like that, but just have an adult conversation about this shit, understanding that adults get into adult stuff. Adults do adult things that they do, and their sexual habits or kinks or whatever is their shit. But at the core of all that is a relationship between those two people. And I figured that the best person to have that kind of conversation with was Toyah, the tutor, as it were. I asked her about it. She agreed to it and went back and read the book. She didn't waste any time. She went back and read it immediately. So I like that. And in keeping with the book, that's good. She follows instructions. But at the same time, I really look forward to having this conversation with the two of them, with you guys here, as a way to delve into a subject that most people won't go into, especially on YouTube, especially not Black YouTube. It's not that damn interesting because, namely, the movie and the book has to do with white folks. So most people aren't interested in it necessarily. But if you understand that adult relationships are adult relationships, regardless of the people and the color of the people involved in it, you understand more about the human condition, people, and relationships than you do about, oh, this is just what white folks get into. No, the hell it ain't. I live in this world, okay? Not a fictitious one. Folks get into all kind of stuff. Black, white, Asian, it don't matter. They get into all kind of stuff with each other. So I felt the need that I would enjoy having a conversation about that kind of stuff with people who are willing to have the conversation with me, because that is my thing. I love having conversations. I do. And I don't care what they're about because I'm not easily offended. But the hard part is finding people willing to have those conversations with me. So today, I actually have two people who are willing to have those kind of conversations with me and actually can bring some intellectual adult mind state to it and not just resort to, sniggling and giggling. I hope. So I'm going to bring these two people up. You know them best as Malaika and Toyah, but I call them friends. So what's going on, friends?
Peace. What's up, Hood?
What's up, her?
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Super Nut Bowl.
Can I make a disclaimer?
Yes, you can make a disclaimer. This is the point where you guys can make disclaimers.
Okay, so yesterday I had reservations to take my best friend out for her birthday that were canceled because of a snowstorm here. So those reservations got changed to today. So you will only have me for about an hour and a half.
Okay.
Because of that. Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Hey,
I did not think that this was gonna happen.
She can join the well, she ain't read the material, so she'd be like a fifth wheel. She can listen. I'm just kidding. I don't like leaving people out. You know me. So okay. So we got you for an hour, so it's good. I started this somewhat on time.
Yes.
Started with you guys first. Okay, that's fine. So that should keep our opinions concise I would think. And you guys can handle it. You two pretty intelligent people. So I'm sure you can actually congeal your thoughts and bring them together. I apologize for being late. Never take your cell phone into the bathroom. You'll never leave that bitch. Or time will fly by while you're just there. Like, oh, I didn't realize. I need an alarm set. So
I have a bit of a disclaimer.
mhm.
My sound under the water, my sound a little off. I just have a head cold I've been wrestling with all week. So if I sound a little raspy, it's not bad connection. It's just me dealing with this little bit of cold. That's it.
Okay. You and me both. It's been very cold here, and I woke up this morning with a slight headache. So I was in the restroom taking medicine to make my head stop hurting before I got on. So I have a mystery guest in the background who wants to join this conversation. Mystery guest, have you read 9.5 Weeks or watched the movie? I know you can probably get into the conversation. I know you probably got something to add to the conversation. I just want to know if you read the material. I did promise this time to Malaika and Toyah that we can go through it. But if you got inputs and familiar with the material, that would be awesome. Put it in the private chat because I haven't brought you up yet, so nobody knows who you are. Just trying to shake it out so we can get this rolling because she's on limited time and I'm not putting up a timer. She's just gonna peace out. Because I saw her snowstorm picture that looked kind of cool. And Mr. Guest says, sorry about that. Okay, no worries. Sit in the chat. I know you have some decent insights. All right, folks. So my disclaimer is this is not a usual on the show, and I will do my best to refrain from any obtuse profanity because I want people to actually be able to watch this and get what the book is about, what the movie is about, and maybe if they take their time, go back and actually read and watch some of this. Because the first thing I will say to lead off the conversation is to understand the events of this book are a true story. They're not fictitious. This is a true story of something that happened in a relationship that this woman had, and she wrote it from her perspective. The book is written like journal entries where she is recounting what the relationship that she had was. And at the time of this relationship, it was like the late 70s, early 80s. The movie with Mickey Rourke and Kim Basinger came out in 86, right? So early 80s. And as Malaika had told me before, there was some contention that most people that read the book hated the movie, that it was not the book. And I was like, wow, really? I didn't know that. I only knew of the movie. I didn't know of the book. Having read the book now and watched the movie directly after finishing the book, yeah, I like the book better. The movie's kind of shit. So it changes my, preteen, teenage view of this movie. Like, wow, this is amazing. I'm watching it now as a 50-year-old man. It's like, this shit is lame. They really glossed over a lot of shit. There's not even much dialogue in this. I mean, did they get a page of dialogue at all? Or is it just a bunch of strewn together scenes? But that's my impression on it right now. So I'll jump in. Whoever wants to go first, go first. We'll try to make sure we don't talk over each other so people can hear it on the playback. But the floor is yours, special guest. So, what do y'all want to say?
A little bit of trivia. The movie was actually made in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
The people couldn't get a distributor for it because they didn't know how to put it out because the movie was touching on a lot of sexual content
which we always know is problematic in America, right?
Well, especially back in 1980s.
80s.
You could see nudity, but this was dealing with sexual themes of domination, S&M.
Yeah, all stuff nobody is into nowadays.
But Metro Goldwyn and Mayer, MGM, picked it up and they put it out in 1986 and went through various cuts to the one that we saw in the movie theaters, and then they put out the director's cut that we see now. directed by the great Adrian Lyne, who is known for making movies based on a lot of tongue-in-cheek sexual content. Uh, Kim Basinger says and stated this is one of her favorite and best acted movies of her career.
Sorry.
Certain scenes where there's a particular scene where Adrian Lyne forced her to do and was really pushing her, and it was the scene where she's crawling on her knees for the money, and she's really crying because she said she didn't feel good. And Adrian Lyne pushes Mickey Rourke to tell her to do that, and Mickey Rourke, in this scene, he takes his belt off and it was acting like he was going to whip her, but he just improvised that, and that was scaring Kim Basinger. And she said they had to cut, and she had to go back to her hotel, and she cried and cried and cried, and they kept that. So that's how a lot of high stakes were going on in this movie. I agree with you. When you come back to this as a more mature adult with a little bit more open eyes, I read the book. Her memoirs were very cool. You're hearing everything from her perspective.
Okay,
You're
let's
hearing,
keep it short because remember we're on a time frame for Toyah, so we got to keep it pithy, 2 minutes or less.
I kind of like the book and the movie on the same level, both. I could tell the movie was looking at it now, I was like, it was okay. Now, it was missing a lot of stuff. It kind of jumped, like I was like, wow. It kind of just ended like that, but it had a lot of good tones into it. But pass it on to Toy until we go in for some more stuff.
Yeah, so we can go deeper. Go ahead, Miss Toyah.
I'm gonna be the voice of contention here because I liked the movie better. And the reason why is because the movie did more to illustrate in ways that I felt like the book felt short. While I appreciated that the book was darker and more gritty in terms of its exploration, and because it was written in first person from Elizabeth McNeill's standpoint, I did appreciate that about the book, but I really connected more with the movie. That might be because I saw the movie first. So I'm willing to bet that that has a lot more to do with it. And the fact that it was written before I was born and like just the implications of that time period, I've always admired the late 70s, early 80s because it seemed like a time where people were just more fun. People were interested in having more fun. And so that came across just with reference to there not being so much restraint. Um, and even though this is about BDSM and restraint is a huge piece of that, I loved that the woman writing this did so kind of with reckless abandon that we didn't necessarily see carried out in the movie. While I understand that it was a time period where the movie had to be more tame, and the two people that they chose to star in it had a lot to do with that. Like, I think Kim Basinger was an amazing choice, just knowing her history and what she contributed as an actress. Um, Even when you told me that it was Mickey Rourke, I was surprised because I'm like, this is not what he looks like today. But
Right.
yeah, so I just wanted to put that in that I'm the one vote for, even though Malika has a half vote on each side, I'm the one vote for liking the movie better than the book.
I'll say that the movie always has a special place in my heart because for a young preteen boy or whatever, it opened my world up to a lot more stuff than I was actually aware of that went on in relationships. Even though I was always curious about different things and adults or sexual relationships anyway. It opened it up in a little bit more of a way to understand how I wanted to be as an adult male. Right. I never saw myself being married. I always saw myself being a bachelor, but when I saw the movie and I saw how John Gray lived and stuff like that, I was like, damn, that's the kind of stuff that I want. Your own plush pad and stuff like that, a hot chick doing some freaky stuff. It's like, damn, that sounded like adult life to me. That's why I wanted to grow up. I never wanted to be a kid. It's one of the, shall I say, tapestries to my understanding of what it meant to actually be an adult, right? And a lot more exploration to some of this stuff that I didn't actually have a language for or understanding of when I was young about adult sexual relationships, what's involved in it, what it could be, what it can't be. So I always have a special place in my heart for the movie, always do. But after reading the book and going back to the source of the original work, I can see some gaps in the movie as well as I can see some gaps in the book. And I think the movie got away with the titillation part that, like Mike was putting in the chat, it's all about domination. Well, you didn't get that in the movie. You didn't really get the domination part in the movie because even reading the book, it's easy to say it was BDSM, but the book, yes. The movie, not really. You didn't see much of that. You didn't. There were exactly 2 to 3 scenes where he actually mentioned or said something about where he actually abused her. One of them was that he told her to pull up her dress and he was going to spank her because she went through his drawers in his house. Now, you never saw a spanking. You saw something else that we can't say on YouTube directly what it was, but you see the conflict in the character Liz's face after it happens. Now, she didn't get the spanking that he said he was going to give her, but something more traumatic actually did happen to her. The other thing was you never saw any of the use of the handcuffs or anything like that in the movies, but it was rampant in the book. That was a daily thing. That was every night. That was an every night thing, which I thought was really interesting given the time frame. Like you mentioned it, Toya, about it being before you were born. And it's during the age when I was, not even a elementary school kid, right? I'm born in 73. So this is stuff that was all going on at the time that I'm growing before I hit 10 years old, right? And the culture at that time, it hadn't even had that explosion of AIDS or anything like that, but it's still coming out of, the free love 60s and stuff like that. So the 70s was a wild time sexually, especially in New York. All that Studio 54 and stuff like that you guys hear about, that was around the 70s and stuff. So there was a lot of, wild sex stuff going on that makes me wonder how was this happening in the world? But then they still were shy about talking about this stuff in a movie. Put it out in a book, but they couldn't talk about it in a movie. And it was, to me, this woman who wrote this story was not living in a vacuum. These were not the only 2 people in America that was doing this stuff. They couldn't be. So was it really a dirty secret? Because to me, it's more about power, submission, and pretty much that. Yeah, just power and submission. Not so much domination, but understand how you submit to another person. So, you guys' thoughts in that way?
You're right. It was implied, but never really showcased in the movie. What I liked about the book is that because you're reading about it, you can allow your imagination to take course and visualize it for yourself, what's being discussed. So I think there was a miss there with reference to how the movie showcased it because again, it was implied but never really shown.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows if the movie was made today, what differences that would make. Uh,
You're gonna see it all.
right,
It's
right,
gonna be
and
too
and
much. Like
for
Jesus.
me personally, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and be a little vulnerable and just say that
You're,
it
you're in a
spoke
safe place.
to it spoke towards a lot of my desires with reference to just being submissive and wanting that sort of attention. And
Mhm.
so I think it was beautiful to kind of get into the mind of a woman and see how she would describe the interpretations of what was happening. Um, there's a quote I want to highlight from it, if
Mm.
you don't mind.
I do not mind. Thank you.
Okay, so she says, on my knees, my head, on my arms, sounds from my throat that I can't interpret, neither fear nor longing, but the inability to distinguish between the two.
Mhm.
And I feel like that really summed up her push and pull between this man that is sort of an enigma and these strong, passionate desires that she was having towards him, and the things that they were sharing,
Mhm.
um, and liking it, but not liking it, and not sure if she should.
Mhm.
Uh,
Pushing them
so
taboos. Yeah.
right, right. And so when you talk about artisan, the time period that this came out and how we were coming out of this free love thing and before AIDS became what it became, um, it just was nice to read those words from the woman's perspective about pushing the envelope on how she could really get into these passions and desires.
And I would echo that to say this. One thing to remember about this story when you see this title 9.5 weeks, understand that the reason why I don't jump on that it's just about domination is that in the book it's implicit that she always has a choice and she
Hmm.
knows it and she's always choosing to do these things. Things are done to her when she comes, but she never has to show up to his house ever again. She doesn't. And he gives her the freedom to have that choice. But she chooses to do that stuff all the time. The stuff that they go through and he does, she allows it. And that's the unspoken or the ununderstood part of that whole sub dominant culture is that the sub actually has the most power in that situation because they can always leave. They can always leave. It's their choice if they want to leave. So, like you were reading in the passage, she's having that conflict between what she sees as being her limits being pushed or taboos, but enjoying it at the same time. She's having that, discussion with herself while she's enjoying these things. So that understand she always could leave, and she did. At a point, she left. He didn't stop her, didn't, but it was hard for her because she did understand all this too but wonderful comes with this other side too. That some of the stuff she liked, some of the stuff she didn't like. So I just wanted to make that point clear. She always had a choice. It was to me, domination means you do not have a choice, right? But
Right.
submission means you're choosing to. This is
Hmm.
what you choose to do. You choose to give somebody that power. And when you play those games like that, that's what you rub up against. You rub up against that understanding, man, maybe I don't like this 100%, but you know what? This part actually feels kind of good. So what do I do? Do I stop it because it doesn't feel good? It doesn't feel as good as I hate it, or what? You weighing that shit on the scales. You are. And that's what it plays with, that idea. The book plays with it more so than the movie does. And that's where the movie lets me down a little bit after watching it again last night, is that as wordy as this woman can be and flowery in some places and descriptive, the movie falls really short because it's not a lot of dialogue in the movie at all. It's not. It's mostly just jumping through the book, making scenes. And I'm like, wow, that's you leaving out some stuff that
Hmm.
would make you understand more of Liz's dilemma outside of her just looking off somewhere, being absent minded, while she's supposed to be doing her work because she's just thinking about this man. Oh, he does these things, and I don't understand. You're not really understanding what she's grappling with outside of she doesn't understand
Hmm.
them. So
Um,
go ahead, Micah.
one of the things that I garnered from the movie, um, after the street fair scene when they're in the Italian restaurant,
Mhm.
he is
Second meeting, yeah.
He's slowly grooming her.
Mhm.
In the movie, in some parts in the book, the way he's slowly grooming her under the veil of romance and being the romantic guy, he's grooming her to be a sub. And he's feeding her. When he starts feeding her the food, when he starts having her drink the wine, he's trying to be romantic. And I said, he's grooming her. I said, and I start seeing that. Those were the little Easter eggs.
Mhm.
Another important scene, when she's eating over his house and she asks him, I want you to see my friends. And he's like, no, no. And he starts banging his head on the table. And I think a friend or a client of his called. But he says to her, he says, I want you to stay. You don't have to, you don't have to wash dishes. You don't have to cook. You don't have to clean. I'll feed you. I'll bathe you, quote unquote. When he said bathe, I was like, oh shit. That was like direct from the book. And then I had to go and look at the book and I said, he says that shit to her.
Mhm.
That was grooming. But then you take a look at her, she's all in awe of him. I said, he is grooming her. But then I was like, don't go for it. He's pulling you in, he's reeling you in. That's the tractor beam of him getting it. But then I saw and I said, okay. But then I'm looking in the book, their second meeting, they're just having lunch. But he's talking to her, and like how you said, from their first time she comes to the house and she's there, he tells her what he wants her to do. She has to wear that white shirt. She has to come in and she has to be cuffed. She didn't like it at first, but then remember you said, you don't have to stay if you don't want to. You can always leave. He gives her the option. But then, like, she's thinking about it and she stays. And then she puts the handcuffs on. And then that was the first interlude into the Dom sub relationship. And I was like, oh shit. You said this before we were talking about it. She could have left, but
She could
she
have left.
stayed.
She stayed. She
So
was enticed. I mean, me personally, I don't like the term grooming because it has so much negative connotations nowadays. But he was testing her out. He was testing her out. And if you compare 50 Shades of Grey and 9.5 Weeks at this point, Christian Grey and John Grey did the same things. They know their proclivities.
mhm.
They're with somebody who does not have those same proclivities, but they're really attracted to them. They're both testing them with subtle words, subtle statements, things that they do to see if they are submissive to them giving them direction. Is the woman okay with that? And they always give the woman the option to not have to listen to that. They can always say no. So at least in 9.5 Weeks in the movie, yeah, you see him. If you've read the book, you get it, right? You see him in the Italian restaurant giving her a little bit of history, showing how much of an intellect he actually is, feeding her food, giving her wine to drink and stuff like that. But they're adults. That's why I don't like to use the term grooming, because grooming seems like something you do to somebody younger than you that don't know what the hell is going on. She's an adult. She's been married for 3 years, for God's sake, and divorced. She know what a man feeding her is. She know what a man offering her some wine to drink is, right? When they're out. This is their second meeting, but first time actually sitting down and talking with each other, right? So it is in some senses kind of romantic in that notion. But when he takes her back to the houseboat that he's watching for a friend or whatever, put sheets on the bed or whatever, and then tells her, well, there's no cab waiting outside. You came here. You don't really know me and stuff. He's testing her to see if she's uncomfortable, because she's followed him up until that point, which means she is willing to follow his direction. To a point she felt a little bit uncomfortable, and he let her leave. She said, I want to go. I want to go home. Okay, we out. It's always a door that she is willing to walk through. And she chooses to walk through and stay in that threshold or in that room that she's walked into, or leave. She always has that choice. She regularly chooses not to leave. Now, in the book, it was completely different. Yes, he would, after they've had their little dalliances a couple of times, yeah, handcuffed, to the kitchen table, sitting there, or dining room table, sitting there while he, he's made the food, he's done all of the stuff, and he's feeding her and drinking, and she's sitting there cuffed at his side. She was down for that. She understood what it was. She actually remarks in the book how her wrist didn't turn pink anymore from the handcuffs because she understood how to work with them on.
Mm-hmm.
She understood that. And understand, folks, this is the part in the book. This was why I say the book is a little bit more raw than the movie. That was every night. And true enough, she would have how he set it up. These were the rules. She had her daytime life. She would go to work. She would do her job. She had her friends and all the rest of that. But after 5, she came to his house. He was in charge. She didn't have to do shit. Not at all. He did everything. When I say everything, I mean everything. The cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the bathing, the buying the stuff, all of that. She didn't have to do anything but what he let him do, what he wanted to do with her. And it was usually some sexual or some rough shit. And she was kind of down for it. Some of it she didn't like at first, but she went along with the shit. Because if she didn't want to do it, what would he do, y'all? He would get her bags and shit and take them out of her house and call her a fucking cab to get on her way. Plain and simple. And she chose to stay every time. Every time. Given that option, she didn't want to leave. She couldn't, in a sense. So what you got on that, Toyah? Would you not want a man to do everything for you? All you got to do is give him your evening?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I like the most about the unwritten contract here is the fact that we're seeing that submission is really contingent upon permission and having this unwritten contract between two people who are willing to push the boundaries on that, but understanding that as the submissive in this contract, that your permission is what allows it to go further and deeper. It also sets the stage because, like you, I don't agree that it's grooming. I do think it's setting the stage for how much further the envelope can be pressed and pushed, bartering on that that permission,
right?
And so I think the book had a lot more leeway in explaining and expressing that, but again, it relies heavily on your ability to have an imagination and put yourself in her shoes if you're reading it. I love the fact that he was so he was so forward thinking that he kind of had everything planned out. As long as he got that permission, he knew exactly what would be needed to carry out the scene how he wanted it to go. And so that's a large part of it. Yes, setting the stage, but also getting the permission so that the stage can play out exactly how you want it to. Those are the key factors here. You can't have that level of comfort without it. And soon, and to also be able to pull it back and say, well, if I'm not getting your permission, I don't want any of it at all. You can go. I have no use for you.
Right. And that's when the thing from the book about John Gray is really controlled. Like in the book, he works on the stock market. So he makes a shitload of money, right? He takes care of his family. Nice house. Everything is basically new, crispy. He takes care of the people who work for him. Anybody that he brought to the house or anything like that, he was always really polite and all of that stuff. He's always really controlled and treats people considerately. But this part of him was the part that she saw. Nobody else saw this part of him. This is the part that he saw. Now, the one part that got me, that really just threw me for a loop when I was reading it, was a time he came in and they were going to get into the evening festivities. And it was the first time he actually hit her, and he smacked the shit out of her. Right across her face, slapped the fuck out of her. And it's pretty much described like that in the book, that there was some blood, her face was swelling or whatever. And then after the swelling, is on her face, he's tracing, the swelling marks on her face because he says he liked her skin and stuff like that. Right. Now, the flip side to that is he takes care of her, the ointment and cleaning it and stuff like that. He does all of that shit. It's like, to me, psychologically, it's somebody that's having a really weird relationship because he takes care of her like he is a nurse, bathing her, good smelling salts and oils and stuff like that, massaging her skin, making sure she's rested and fed and the right food. He's taking care of all of that shit. That's a responsibility. And that's the responsibility in this BDSM relationship, if you wanted to call it that. That's the responsibility of the dom. You have to do all of that stuff. You have to take care of the people who are submissive to you. You don't get to lax on that shit and lose control. And that's where I think people lose it. You don't get to be in control and be a dom. Lose control and be a dom. You don't. You have to be in control. So all of the stuff that he does to her, even if he just had her over the house and went down on her for an hour after feeding her and bathing her and all that stuff, she allowed that shit to happen, and he had to be in control of himself the whole time. It wasn't just, we're going to be swinging from the sit. No, it was never any of that, which makes it seem like he's almost a damn robot to some extent, because it could have been a lot worse with somebody who didn't have that level of control and just thought they needed to be in charge. She would have got her ass really beat or killed in some of them situations that they were in. So, yeah, that's my thought on that part. What you guys got, Malaika?
In both medias, definitely he was in control. I wanted to touch on the same thing that you guys said. If you ever notice in the movie, whenever he wanted to introduce anything romantic or anything that was leading to dom, he always asked her, he said, Elizabeth, would you do something for me?
Mm-hmm.
Or Elizabeth, would you mind if I do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was always asking. Mickey Rourke's character was always in control. It was always about even tone, always about speaking in a manner. It was kind of like a psychopathic like that. Like you always knew something that was underneath. It was here's how the way it was to me when it was well directed. Like you see the romantic part, the intentions, but then like he says something, would you do something? It's like, oh shit, what's happening now? It was all nice, it was all great and romantic. Then he comes and he says something. I was like, oh wow. And I remember the scene, like I said, when he tells her, I want you to know if you can crawl for me. And I said, oh, this is the scene. When I used to watch this movie like religiously when I was a kid going into my early 20s, that's where I would turn the movie off. I said, I can't hate. I used to hate that. But as I watched it and I said, okay, what are you feeling? I said, I'm feeling unease because this is where you said it. This is the real him. This is a part of him. And I said, okay, this is something where I said, all right, go with that feeling. This is the part of him where he wants to control and dominate her. There was a scene in the movie where he's feeding her and she's sick. And remember, she says to him, how would you know that I would respond to you the way that I do? Did you treat the other girls the way he did? And she even says that in the movie. And he doesn't say anything to her in the movie. And he doesn't say, he doesn't say anything to her in the movie. He doesn't say anything to her in the book. And that was always unique to me. And it just showing, but also there's another part where he's brushing her hair in the movie. And he's just hovering over her. And I was like, damn, give her some breath. But I said, no, he's dominating her. She's his possession. She's property. That's like a serious level of objectivity. And I just noticed that. And he's taking care of it like it's a precious gem, or it's like one of those beautiful Russian dolls that you put into a china cabinet behind a wall. So I was like, okay, that's why I know. That's why I know this.
Well, I saw it more as him like doting on her. He wanted to do everything for her. And I see it that way, like a son having to take care of his mother, right? That's what a mother would do for a child, right? That's how I saw it. Knowing the John Gray story, it kind of touches on it, but not a lot about that in his family. It's something with his family and his mother, and that's what he sees to do. Now, either my inference is that he did that kind of stuff for his mother, and that's coming from a psychological bit. Like all this stuff comes from somewhere, right? John Gray did what he did with the women that he had because it came from somewhere. He developed this shit somewhere, right? It wasn't just with the women. He just didn't start dating and start doing this stuff. This developed somewhere in him that he wanted to do these things because, like you're saying, he always asked her for permission to do certain things to her, but he also expressed, hey, I always liked, since I was an 8-year-old boy or 13-year-old boy, I see in this lace. I've never had a woman in real life who liked to wear this lace or these garters or something like that. He really liked seeing that. He really was in love with Liz, the way she looked and all of that. He was really in love with her. So he liked seeing certain things. That's why you see it played up in the movie a lot more. He spends a lot of time just staring at her.
Yes.
Just staring at her. He's dope, taking care of her hair and her skin and all the rest of that stuff. And when she's sick, coming over her house, taking her out of her house, putting her in his apartment, calling doctors to come help her and stuff like that. He is doting on her. He is taking complete care of her. I wouldn't say is dominating her because she tells him no, she wants to be at home. He ain't hearing that shit. No, you need to be well. You need to be okay. It was the same thing with Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. He did the same thing for Anastasia. He took care of her. As much as she protested about not wanting to do, no, you need to eat. You're not looking well. You need to eat. You're going to see this doctor. This doctor is coming to see you. I don't want a doctor. You're going to see this damn doctor. He was taking care of her, and she was not used to that, just the same way Elizabeth was not used to that. She hadn't had that with her ex-husband. She had. So it was completely different to go from that, not having, to go to a man that's attending to your every damn need. All you need to do is go to work. You don't even actually need the money you're making just to pay your bills in your empty apartment that you ain't been to in months because you're spending every night coming to him in his place. And yeah, Des said it was an obsession. It was an obsession. He was obsessed with her in a sense, but here's the control part of it. He knew that and he could let it go. And that's the part, because he could let it go, that's the part that shifts it from being, yes, it's absolutely an obsession, but maybe it wasn't. It was a desire that he knew he could fulfill with her, or he found he could fulfill a lot of it with her. And at the point where she jumped off, he understood it was no more that he could fulfill with her, and he let that shit go. Obsessed people never let go. They can't. That's what makes it obsession. That's what makes obsession dangerous, because they can't let go. He let her go. He let the other women he was with go. The same way Christian Grey let his other subs go. You have to. They ain't down for it no more.
To that?
Yes, ma'am.
Because when you say he let his other obsessions go, and Malaika talks about how Liz was asking for feedback of the other women, that kind of ruins it for me. Because if you are really entered into this contract, like I said, this unspoken contract, the others that came before you or that will come after you are of no importance. And so, in order to get the most out of the exchange, one must be completely enthralled in the situation before them. And that's something that I think a lot of women get caught up in, just in general. And again, for me, it was ruining it, because it was like, why are you worried about the wrong things? This has nothing to do with your exchange. You need to be more in the moment, to be present about what's happening here. And so much of that passion is contingent upon understanding your role in it. But if you're worried about how everybody else was doing it, you're losing focus. You're missing the point. And so, yeah, I think even with Des's point, she was his obsession. That's what fed the passion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're only the fire is only going to be burnt for as long as I am obsessed with you, my muse, my object.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to leave off by saying one more quote, which was that she said, "My body had nothing to do with me. It was a
Mm-hmm.
decoy to be used whichever way he decided toward the end of exciting us both." So if you're willing to let him do that, then let him do that.
Mm-hmm.
Feel the fullness of the experience that he is providing for you.
Yeah, I would agree that I just lost my train of thought for a hot moment. Um Damn, I had two competing thoughts that just crack headlong into each other. Go ahead, Malika. Less of the session, more mature makers, more intriguing and far more dangerous. You need to read. Yes, you do need to read this book. Dad said, especially you. You definitely need to read this book, and it's a short. It's a short book. It's a short book. If you're not taking breaks like me to have to do other shit in life, you can read it as quick as Malaika and Toyah read that shit. You can read that shit in like maybe a day or so. It'll be done. You'll be like, holy shit. What was I gonna say about it? Was something on the obsession part of it, or the contract. So understand, Toyah keeps telling you guys that it was an unwritten contract. This is where 9.5 weeks and 50 Shades of Grey differ in the fact that yes, in 9.5 weeks it was two adults talking. It was an unwritten contract. In 50 Shades of Grey, there was a written contract. It was. And he offered it to her before he did anything with her ass. And she had to sign it. Now, to Toya's point about worried of not being in the moment and worried about, the past person or who's going to come next. Yes, that is women's problem a lot of the damn time. Because the fact that she asked about the women before her proves that she was insecure about what she had right now.
Mm-hmm.
And couldn't, like you said, it takes you out of it. Yes, because she's not focused on the here and now. It don't matter who the hell came before you. You here now. And you got to play your role, your position. Otherwise, you'll be gone. And so when you're there, you can't worry about the people that came before you or who's going to come after you. Nobody will come after you if you're doing your job. There won't be. So that's none of that is your actual concern. And I think that's why at different points he didn't answer her, Malika, like you said in the movie. So how'd you know I would respond to you this way? He told her, I saw myself in you.
Yep.
You look for those kindred flames. You do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's evident in the movie that when they first see each other, the first time they see each other in the Chinese restaurant and whatnot, it's immediate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the romance part about it. It's immediate. They spend in the movie, they spend a lot more time outside in the daylight, hanging out doing normal dating stuff than in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Book, they went out on the weekends and did shit because he worked. He worked a serious job. She worked a serious job at a magazine. So they had their work that they did, but this was how they worked their lives to be in each other's lives all the time. It was the evenings. And they might be up from, 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. Didn't matter. They was doing what the hell they was doing. They get their rest and then they take their ass to work and then they come back and do that. And when they got into a rhythm of actually being a couple, they're riding the train to work together and shit.
Mm-hmm.
He's buying her clothes and dressing her, how he likes to see her look and stuff that he finds appealing to her. And she did it because she knew it was appealing to her and she liked the way she looked in some of this stuff too. Now it's played up a little bit in the movie where he's taking her out and she's bought these clothes and she asks, you're not going to ask me what I think of it? And he tells her no. Why? Because he knows her. He knows she likes it. She's just trying to get some fucking pushback. And he's just partially entertaining that shit like, no, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just these two right now, Trigger Man. Just these two right now. Because all three of us has read this book and watched this movie. So that's what this show is about today. Geek stuff will come later. So for me as a young man, I realized watching the movie again how much of this stuff I've actually used in life that came out naturally in me, right? Like giving a woman actual direction to see how she responds to that shit. At this point in my life, that's evident, right? It's really evident when I do it to me what I'm looking for. When I was younger and did it, I understood it might have been some cool stuff to do, but like all things psychologically, you have to understand why you're doing it and what the repercussions are of doing it. Some people don't know how to respond to that shit, and you have to know what you're trying to get out of it. In the book, it was very clear how he kept finding boundaries for her and pushing past them. Maybe the first boundary was let me blindfold you. Maybe the second boundary was here. Let me put this handcuff on you at the table. Let me feed you. Let me give you something to drink. Maybe let me put my cock in your mouth after you've eaten some of this food. I'm not asking. You just know what to do. All of these things were steps along that path of finding what her boundaries were and pushing them a little further to get her to the point that they're having this relationship. They were already having a relationship the whole time, but all of that is in the process of you have a relationship with somebody, you start developing boundaries and you see where they are and you either push past them or you play within them. He kept pushing past them. He wanted to see more. But the other part, now I remember the point that I had, that was more interesting than dominance. The book, she talks about it more. He listened to her. He listened to every fucking thing she said. Everything she said, she might have liked. And I was remembering this part in the book where she's talking about they were just having a half conversation about some stuff that they liked. And she mentioned something about liking some blueberries. That motherfucker left for an hour and a half, came back with a newspaper, blueberries, and heavy cream. Mixed that shit up and they had blueberries and cream that night. Because that's what he did. He paid attention to her needs and her wants. It wasn't just, it's all about just the sex shit for me. He paid attention to her. And she said she had never really had a man that was like that paid that much attention. You couldn't have any stray thoughts or stray things like that. It was shown in the movie where he bought her that shawl that she saw. That was $300 something. She liked it. He knew she liked it. He got it for her. Just that simple. He just got it for her. That was just it. And it wasn't buying her off. It was giving her something she liked, giving her what she said she wanted. She made a comment about the bed. What did he do? They went out and bought a new bed. Brand new. He was trying to be in service of her. And that's where people misunderstand. The dominant part of that is also being a good sub. He was submissive in some ways to her too. It may seem like little shit, but it was doing things that she wanted done for her. And he would do those things. So that's what made the interplay between the two of them the more complex and interesting, especially when he kept really pushing her past the boundaries she thought she had at that moment. And then her realizing now this might be a little bit much, but damn, I'm really liking this. Can't go back now. What y'all got? How much time you got left, Toyah?
About 10 minutes.
Holy shit.
Let it go, brother. Go ahead, Toyah. You can take the turn. Take your turn. You can go before me.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about 50 Shades because I did read that as well. But I didn't see the movie. And so I like the fact that you brought up that in 50 Shades there was a contract. And that's probably the biggest difference between the two because it made it a lot more sterile, in my opinion. Whereas, like I said in the book, 9.5 Weeks, a lot of your imagination does the heavy lifting. And I like having that leeway. But because I saw the movie first, it resonated more with me because of the visual aspect of it. Like you were just talking about the bed scene, even in the movie when they showed buying the bed and how she was like, this is ridiculous. She was kind of like, turned on by the ridiculousness of it. But again, so much of the unwritten contract, but also in 50 Shades the agreement is that I, as the dominant one, am getting pleasure out of seeing you pleased. It pleases me to see you pleased, but it also is pleasing for me to do what I want with you as this object because that gives me pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this constant push and pull of if you give me what I want, I'll make sure you have what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what's so much of a turn on about this type of lifestyle, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, it's just nice to see that fleshed out. And if anybody is listening to this, I do implore you, not just Dead Set, I implore you to read the book because these kinds of things have, I think, become more taboo again. Even though we're in a different era and a different age, it would be nice to have those conversations again and really push the limits of what is okay, what is acceptable. Artisan keeps talking about how everybody's grown here. And a lot of the conversation about sex nowadays is so pedestrian. People aren't taking full advantage of,
Great
hey, we're
word.
adults, you
Yeah.
know, we're adults here. We can push the limits. We can really do what it can be a sandbox if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the things I enjoyed that he said in the movie. And there's a scene in the movie and in the book, right? The scene in the movie where she wants to take him to this art gallery show and meet her friends and stuff like that. And he banging his head on the table. He doesn't want to do that. He tells her flat out, I'm not interested in your friends. I don't want to meet your friends. I just want you here at this place. I understand that. I've said that shit before
Mm-hmm.
to a woman. I'm not interested in your family and your friends at all. I'm serious. I have said that before. That's why I'm watching this shit now. It's like, damn, that has come out of my mouth. I have done that. It's come out of my mouth. Like, no, I'm not interested in your friends and shit. I'm at that point. I don't give a fuck about all of them. Why do I need to have this, you know, cut and paste stereotypical relationship dynamic? No, I'm not interested in them. They're gonna go with you if you leave, and I don't need to be friends with them. It's a waste of time at that point. I'm interested in you. If we work, we work. And the other thing that he says in the movie that is an important point for this whole thing is that you decide the rules in your relationship. You have whatever kind of fucking relationship you want to. That's why I stay away from calling it taboo, except to describe it and how other people see it. But as I look at it, those two grown adults having whatever kind of relationship they feel like having, because that's what the hell they can do.
Mm.
So if she wants to be chained up to a kitchen table every night, so be it. Knock yourself out. It ain't hurting nobody else. It's the two of y'all. And if you don't like it, you can leave. Okay, then when you don't like it, you'll leave. Plain and simple. But if you like it, then you put some ointment on your wrist and then you'll be chained up to that table tonight. It's just the way it is. Who's to say that that's wrong or right? It's the two of y'all making that choice. So for me, Toyah already answered this for you, Rosie. But for me, I would say read the book first too. I would say read the book first because I'm always in favor of going back to the source first with certain things. If you wanted to get a brief overview of the book, watch the movie first, because then you'll get an idea of what's going on, but it'll throw you for a loop when you get into the book of how much stuff was actually left out of it. Because I'm looking at the movie now as the greatest hits part. It's the bullet points. Like, there's a scene in the book where she dresses up like a man and they're out at the club and she's dressing as a man. He's out in public with her, kissing on her and stuff like that, and doesn't care. They get accosted by two dudes out in the street, right? She says some shit to him, and then the guys start chasing him, and so they end up in a fight. And at one point, she pulls out this knife. This guy has a knife. She gets it from him, and she pulls out a knife and stabs the guy in his ass, right? Now, the knife is significant because in the book, the knife was something that John Gray bought her, and he tests her to have her go out and rob somebody. And she does it. She puts on this costume, dressed like a man, or her Mr. Beard costume, or whatever they called it. And she plans it out, this one floor in the elevator, and she robs this guy in an elevator with that knife. She does. Now, this ain't sexual necessarily at all, right? She robs him, takes his wallet, comes back to John's house, puts the wallet on the table, and she's going over in her mind the exhilaration and then sickness she feels about doing that. But it's pushing the boundary. He asked her to do it. She did it. And when he comes home, they look through the wallet, find out whose it is, and then they promptly call him and tell him where to pick up his wallet. And sure, after that, they bang like wild rabbits because she felt all sick and stuff like that, but she did it. That's where the whole knife thing comes from. But if you didn't know that story from the book, it's totally thrown away in the movie because it's just a knife some guy has and she sticks in the ass. That's not the significance of that knife, because it was a very expensive, beautiful looking knife. The way they described it, I like knives, so I'm paying attention to this shit. Mother of pearl and all the rest of that shit. It's a nice looking knife that he bought her to do a crime. To get her to do a crime, and she fucking did it. And felt exhilarated and sick all at the same time, but also felt aroused when she got back home, happy that he could see what I did. I did this good for him. And then what did they do? They called the guy, put it in a dumpster outside of John's apartment building. And then they watched him from the window come and get his shit. That's when they start humping like rabbits after the dude picked up his wallet. Watch him.
Continuously setting the stage for each dalliance. You took the words right out of my mouth. The fact that it really led to them being turned on and turning that moment into pleasure.
I want to attack on something that was in the movie and in the book. You talked about the department store scene in the bed section. Before they went to the bed section, he tells her in the book also, and in the movie, she likes this locket. And he tells her, take it. And she's like, what? He says, take it. Now, she takes it in the movie, but the way in the book, she's telling you she's so scared. She's feeling the fear and the apprehension, but at the same time, she's drawn to it. But then the same scene that they went through in the bed where, they're being very coy and he's playing with her and she's feeling very, nervous, because in the book, there are people walking around, but in the movie, it's just Elizabeth, John, and the woman that works there at the bed department where he's trying to open her legs. He compliments on her toes. But when she gets into the cab with him after leaving the department store, she opens up her shirt and shows it to him. And he smiles at her and he touches it, and they started kissing and start touching each other in the cab. And she gets so exhilarated from stealing it, but also exhilarated because it makes her happy that she took it. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that was something. Yeah, go ahead. The more excited he got, the more excited she got.
Because she was able to make him excited. That was the thing. She did something that actually excited him, because you have to understand that the interplay here. He's given her a lot of pleasure, a lot. All this sexual stuff that they're doing is giving her a hell of a lot of pleasure. She's really enjoying this, but she doesn't have to do anything for it. She don't got to ride him, none of that shit. Nothing. He's doing everything. So to be able to turn it around, and he asked her to do something for him, and she does it, and it gives him pleasure. She knows it will probably give him pleasure to do it. She's finally able to reciprocate in some kind of way. Now, that's the part that could seem like, entrapment in a sense, like the push and pull of it. Like, I've done all this for you. You don't want to do something for me? Because he'll tell her that shit too when she was like, this is too much. Oh, really? That's when he would get a little bit upset with her ass. and really, bring the boot down, or as I've told my kids in my own life, you close the door hard on her ass about that shit. Soon as you didn't want to listen or didn't want to follow that shit, or you putting up some offense to it, you can go. You get the hell out of here. Or you could do what I asked you. I asked you to do a simple thing, is what he would tell her. I asked you to do a simple thing. You can't even do that. And it would still be, Malaika, like you were saying, it was almost psychotic. It would still be in that calm voice. I think that's what made it more chilling. Like, he was still calm when he said that shit to her, dude. That's some cold shit. Okay. And Dad say you're right. Pedestrian is an understatement. It is infantile. At the same time, they want to push everything. They have this infantile conversation about it at the same time. I don't get it. I don't get it either. Like, come on. I've grown up in this world. I've seen a lot. And the way we talk about it nowadays seems so ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, the only people who can talk about it openly is people who live alternative lifestyles. Everybody else can't, though. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. We all adults. Everybody does this shit to greater or lesser degrees. They all do. So what's the problem with it? If you can't talk about it, you don't need to be doing it. Just my thing. What up, Dr. T? He said, what up, what up? Yeah, we're having a different geek conversation now. This is a freaky geek session. So what was the other part that stood out to me the most about it? You have something, Toyah, before, because I know you the short time in here.
Yes, I'm getting
Don't
ready
be
to walk
showing you
out the
looking pretty
door.
going out. You're supposed to be
So
looking
thank
ugly.
you for having me a part of this conversation. I'd love for us to do this again about something else. But yeah, I implore
Got to do
everybody who's
50
watching
Shades
right
now.
now.
We got to do
Right,
50 Shades.
sure.
We got to do
Why
50 Shades.
not? If you're
That's 3
watching this
books.
and you're enjoying the conversation, please go do something fun tonight. That's all I'm gonna say.
Consenting fun.
Yes, yes.
You don't do shit fun. Have fun with your girlfriend. Tell her I said hello.
All right,
And fuck her for
will
taking.
do.
We planned this a while ago. She fucking up my plans, man. I don't appreciate that shit. I'm gonna get John
Aw.
Gray over here. Like,
Much love to you and Malaika. Peace.
Have a
peace.
good time. Peace. Be safe.
Yeah, it's the snowstorm. Still a good snow picture. That's the picture I used on the thumbnail. It's like, it was a good picture. That's very, very not photogenic. I would say cinematic as in the way it's going, because it was a video. It's like, damn, that's a good ass picture. Should be working in movies.
You know what I noticed from
yeah, Dad said butterscotch like a motherfucker.
what I noticed from the book, from 50 Shades of Grey, the movie and book, and from 9.5 Weeks, the Grey character, they got down to a T.
Mhm.
Very mysterious, very methodical, handsome. But what Elizabeth McNeill, she never gave him a real serious total description of him. She said he was tall, athletic, methodical in his way. She said he had a very encapsulating smile when she first met him. But then when I started seeing 50 Shades of Grey, and then when I went back into the book, I read the book briefly. And I was like, okay, I said, okay, they captured this picture and they made me, and when I did some research about Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke had to lose 20 or 30 pounds to do this character in this movie. And there would be now he was wearing awesome, beautiful suits, especially for the 80s. He was wearing designer tailor-made suits. And Mickey Rourke said they would have designers coming to his hotel room and people coming having put on suits. They were always putting on these like Armani and these Italian cut, these beautiful suits. And Adrian Lyne said, okay, he looks cool, but I don't want him always in a suit. So Mickey Rourke would do, like in this picture right here, he would take off suit jacket and walk around in a t-shirt, and he'll put the overcoat on.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, that's it. I want to have that rugged mystery about him. And he said that's it. And you want him to walk around and have that. And that gave that air of mystery where you're right. You hit the nail right on the head and said there wasn't that much like dialogue between them. There wasn't that much talking. He didn't say anything. Usually when you see a character, like I said, okay, John Gray does not talk like he comes from a very upper crust, rich or well-off family. He has that East Coast accent. You know, the way he walks, he still has a rugged swagger. But he's an arbitrage on Wall Street. So I'm like, okay. So he worked his way up. Christian Grey, they go in his background. He is, you know, his foster family or his adopted family, all are people of greatness. His both parents are rich doctors. You know, even his adopted brother and sister, they're maybe trust fund kids, but they still do well. Somehow this guy, he's a genius intellect. By the age of 20 something, he becomes a multi-billionaire conglomerate head of something.
Yeah, he's pretty smart, but he came from shit.
But one thing, he's methodical and he created his whole character. Everything about him, the way he dresses. And I said, remember I told you when we first started talking, they stole it, or the author stole it, that Christian Grey, he always wears gray, black, and out of one of the movies he wore a navy blue suit. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, that gets into the John Gray character. Like I said, he's very controlled. But what it is that he and Christian Grey both, as characters, are very orderly, very methodical, plan out things, very smart, but also from humble beginnings, right? What I think the changeover from 9.5 Weeks to 50 Shades was with the Grey character was Christian Grey was, you know, his mother was a drug addict and shit. He was abused. And this gets into why he becomes the way he is. You never get that from John Gray in 9.5 Weeks. You don't know why he's the way he is. You don't know how he developed all this. And I think in 50 Shades of Grey, that's why they went into it. That's why you get a Mrs. Robertson, who was instrumental in making Christian Grey into who he was. All of that stuff that he does, he learned from Mrs. Robertson. The way to dress, the way to maintain himself, what rules and stuff like that to have. Because understand, they are controlled men because they live their life by controlling themselves, controlling their urges, learning how to focus those things in different areas. John Gray in 9.5 Weeks is very good at his job, but he treats everybody really respectfully. He does. That's why he makes the money that he makes, doing the job that he does. He's really good at it. Same thing with Christian Grey. Christian Grey is really good at his job, but you wouldn't know that, you know, he was the kid that was getting abused and people putting cigarette butts out on him and shit like that. And, oh, he just don't like to be touched because he got a weird sexual fetish. No, he don't like being touched because he was abused. That's why he don't like being touched. And this woman, as bad as you could say that she was for doing this shit to a teenage boy, taught him how to control himself and have those boundaries in place where he could interact with people, could control himself and understand how to control his environment, in a sense, around him to have the life that he has at that point. Because rich parents, adopted parents or not, he could have still been a piece of shit. And he wasn't. He did a lot of philanthropy. He did a lot of stuff for everybody else that made him really, really rich. That's how it worked. It wasn't about selfishness just for me. He did it for other people, which made him richer. So, and it was like that with both of those Gray characters. The only difference is if John Gray is the prototype, Christian Grey is the upgrade to where you get to see behind the scenes of why this person does the things they do, how they learn how to do these things, and why they do these things. Those are the questions never answered in 9.5 Weeks. You don't know why John Gray does what he does. You don't know how he developed it. You don't know where it came from. You're left like Toyah was saying, for your imagination to fill in those blanks
Mhm.
based on what he has told you in the novel about what his background was. Otherwise, you don't know. He is a mystery for a lot of it.
Which
Because
give
the book is from the woman's perspective. Like, she only knows what he told her.
exactly. Well, that's what I was about to say. We're only taking it because it's from the first person's perspective.
Mhm.
And also, like Toyah said, what she's wanting to believe and her delving into her fantasy.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
also possibly probably what John only wants her to know.
Yeah. Only what he wants to share.
Because remember, he said, you can have your friends during the day, but I want you at night.
Right. The
Because
nighttime is for us.
this is our world now. I don't care about your past. Because remember when he comes to her apartment and on the answering machine is her husband, and she said, "That's my husband. That's my ex-husband. We've been married for 3 years.
Mhm.
You want to know about him?" He just looks at her and gives her the side eye and shakes his head no.
No.
As you could tell, he was like, he didn't care about that.
I don't give a fuck about that dude. Why do I care? He was unbothered by that shit. But when the roles were reversed, she wanted to know.
Yeah.
He didn't answer. Right? What about the other girls?
and also, like you said, when you're going around dealing with the background of this particular character, for years I always wanted to know what was what with the character of John Gray. Who, what, where, when, and why. But like how you said, Christian Grey probably might have filled in those blanks because of what happened. But even at 53, looking at the movie a couple of days ago, you hear that he grew up in a town outside Chicago. His father worked in a foundry. His mother was a clerk in a grocery store, and he had 3 older brothers.
Yeah, 5 brothers.
No, he had 5 brothers.
Youngest of 5. Youngest of 5.
He's the youngest of 5, and he takes care of his parents. So I'm like, okay, so working class family grew up. He said both of his parents are retired, and he said he supports both of them. Okay. But like how you said, there has to be a window point between when he starts to have this control and starts to get domination up to now. What causes this? There's in his hero's journey, let me be apropos. There has to be something that led to these steps, just like in Christian Grey. He meets his Mrs. Robinson, who turns him out. And she has been abusing him ever since what age he was with, 17 to 21.
Yeah, I thought it was like 15 or something like that.
15 to 21. I'm sorry, 15.
And not necessarily abusing him, but she was using him. He was. She became his dom, and he became her sub, and he was her sub for years.
And
The mother's friend, rich friend.
The mother's rich friend who was still married.
Told y'all about married women.
Turned him out. Knew that he was had suffered from issues. Preyed on his innocence and used it.
True enough, Dr. T. I think he was 15. I think he was 15 in the book. I have to go back and read it again.
I think it was between the ages of 15 to 21. Yes.
Because he was a violent little bastard up until that point.
Yeah.
He was violent as fuck.
And also she used him too because that that top-notch beauty salon in New York, she owned, but he also co-owned. He
co-owned it with her. Yep.
Co-owned it with her.
Showed him business.
Yep.
I would have wanted to know the mystery maintains the illusion. Yeah, I understand that, Dad said. That's from a guy. I think that's more from a guy's mindset. We don't want to know. Keep the illusion, right? Lie to me sometimes. I know what reality is. Lie to me. Maintain that shit. Women sometimes want to know that shit. I'm curious, so I like knowing things. It doesn't necessarily ruin it. Don't mean I'm not gonna go along with it. I just like to know what the hell's going on. Just like my bullshit up front. Know what's what, so we're not, playing too much make believe.
You know what another Easter egg I noticed from the movie?
Yeah.
Let
me read this part real quick, and then we can try to round that shit out so people can get involved in the conversation. This is a passage from later in the book, and there's a quote in here that I really like that I actually did underline, because I didn't underline a lot of stuff in the book when I read through it, and I realized I should have, but I didn't. I was just powering through it. But this passage happens towards the end of the book, and they've been involved in some shit, right? And you have to remember, and I'll tell you why to remember this a little bit, that this is a true story. This is a real woman's account of her situation in this relationship with this man. The names are fake, but the actions are real. Okay? So here's the passage. It says, weeks later, stifling is no longer possible. Maybe later yet, a trickle of blood. What would it feel like to be struck so that one bleeds? When you are 4, you can't fathom what it's like to be 5. If you've ever screamed out of control, you can't imagine how it feels. Now I know how it feels. It's like coming. There is a sound far away having to do with me, and surely not having to do with me, not responsibly. My body giving up, giving in, no bounds. Foreign sounds far away. I'm not accountable. This is the quote that I underlined. Years of intermittent faking behind me, the power to fake ecstasy, the stingy, pathetic control it provides. Pant, pant, pant. Ah, darling. Dynamite in bed, whispers a man to his best friend as it's about to enter the living room only a few years ago. So basically, she's reliving what she's gone through with him, and there was some striking going on, and she did bleed a little bit, but she's realizing that her body, in some sense, enjoys that shit. While she doesn't think the sounds are coming from her, they are most certainly coming from her, and she enjoys it. But then she realizes that in that moment that all those years of faking that she had are behind her. What she used to have, how she used to fake it. And it was interesting that she called it stingy, pathetic ecstasy. That's like it is. Because in my mind, I'm thinking of it. I told somebody before, why fake it? If you're not feeling it, say something. Why fake it? If you're not enjoying it, don't lie about it. Because then you can never get to what you actually want to actually enjoy. And that's what she's going through right in that moment. Her brain and rationalizing what's actually going on with her and what she actually does enjoy, what her body actually enjoys and responds to. And then she realizes she ain't got to lie no more. That's the truth of it. She doesn't have to lie. She doesn't have to fake it, because he's going to find it. He's going to get her to that point. And she's working with him. You can get squeamish about the fact that he possibly hit her. There was some blood drawn or something like that. That part of what they were doing is murky. Doesn't say exactly.
Yeah, she doesn't go that much description about
it. Right. Doesn't get that much description about it. Could have just been he smacked her on the ass or whooped her with a belt. Could have been both. Both can draw blood. Don't know. But she's enjoying what the hell is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And lamenting about the fact that, man, I don't got to fake no more. I thought that was fucking key to how out of control the situation was, which is what it was for her. It was just pushing her past the point of being under control, because your limits on yourself as a person are mostly self-imposed.
Mm-hmm. What
you can tolerate, what you can't, in any realms outside of sex or anything like that, is usually self-imposed. You put them on yourself. There's few people who try to break past all of those and live into a place where they know what their limits are, and those limits are out a lot further than this one little box that you're caged in inside. So go ahead, Malaika.
The ending scene from both the book and in the movie.
Mhm.
Hotel.
Mhm.
Hotel Carlisle.
Yeah.
That well, in the book, way more descriptive, way more shit that the movie
Mhm.
pales in comparison to what happens in the daggone hotel room.
It did.
But for in the book, I can understand, and it got more descriptive because he did stuff to her that was leading to a crescendo. That was
Mhm.
like, he introduces sodomy to her, which she's very descriptive about, and she said she's uncomfortable. But he says it became a part of their relationship. She only mentions it the one time when he introduces it to her.
Yeah, because that was he introduced it in the time that she wanted to see what it was like to live as a man, and dressed
Yeah,
up those clothes and stuff like that. And he made her understand what it meant to be a man.
yeah.
She did.
And
So that night she got a little bit of wearing the boys' clothes and what homosexual love is all like.
yeah. Then she couple of times he pays guys to have sex with her. Well, first time he paid a guy to have sex with her and he watched.
I
Second
don't
time,
no, he never paid anybody to have sex with her. That's one of the things he was kind of selfish about.
no, he didn't
He
pay.
had
He
them do
did.
things to her. He paid a
Yeah, he
guy to
had.
beat her. He didn't
Yes,
pay.
that's
He
what I'm
didn't
sorry.
pay her to have sex with her.
Yeah, he
He
paid the
didn't,
guy
he
to
didn't
beat her. My
share her.
fault. My fault.
Yeah,
I
he didn't
apologize
share
for
her.
that.
That was the thing. He never shared her at all.
That's
He
right.
made her
He owned.
watch some things, but he paid a guy, the masseuse,
That's
to
right. The masseuse.
whip her. He paid the
Yes, thank you.
masseuse to whip her and paid him more money to whip her and make her, come from getting spanked. But he ain't paid nobody to have sex with her. No, he
I
didn't do that.
forgot. I forgot
Yeah.
about that. I knew it was something that because she was crying at first, and the masseuse was like,
I can't
"Yo,
do this.
this is crazy. I can't." And he said,
Yeah,
"I'll pay you
35.
more."
Yeah, 35. I give you $30 more. Nope.
And
35. 35, Jimmy. Nope. 40, Jimmy.
he whipped her, and like you said, when she reached orgasm, he's like, "All right, I'm out of here," and he walks her out the door. And she said you could hear him paying him a little bit more. I was like, "Okay, that was crazy."
He paid him. Yeah, he
Now,
paid him $50 more for that shit after the massage.
now, I said, "Damn, this is almost getting close to like some Diddy shit." When I was reading the book, but then the hotel scene, everything was almost to a T until he he tells her to go to this hotel. He wants her to be dressed in a particular way. He wants her dressed. She comes there. He comes in with a prostitute, but she's blindfolded. Elizabeth is blindfolded, the protagonist. But in the movie, she's blindfolded and is kind of doing this kind of titillating that this prostitute's touching her all on the body, and John is
Yeah,
watching it.
a woman is touching her.
That happens in the book, but this woman takes Elizabeth into the bathroom and dresses her like a prostitute and puts cheap makeup on her.
Not the
And
bathroom. She does it right on the bed. She dresses her.
she dresses her on the bed.
Yeah, she dressed her on the bed right in front of him.
And this is the first time she has a menage a trois.
As it were. Because what he does is he pays the prostitute to come in. Liz is blindfolded the whole time. And this is not the first time he has given her directions to come to some hotel and do some things. The first time was when he had her dress up like a man. He gave her directions to go to the hotel. When she got to the hotel room, there was boxes all in the bedroom, and there was instructions on put this stuff on and come downstairs, at this time, right? This is the second time he does it, but this time there are no boxes. There is in the drawer a scarf to blindfold herself with. And when he shows up, she has not blindfolded herself because the motel is kind of seedy and she doesn't want to do it because it's roaching in there and stuff like that. And that's when he comes in and gets kind of pissed off at her, telling her, I asked you to do something simple. Right. She complies, puts the blindfold on, and then this prostitute comes in and undresses her and then redresses her in clothes. And she can feel the fabric and the clothing. She can't see the color. She can tell it must be a woman because she says she can feel the woman's breast against her skin, or she can feel that woman's hair. But she's going with it. She doesn't know what's happening and what these clothes are until the point where the blindfold is taken off of her and she can see this ridiculous fucking wig and these clothes that she's wearing, and that now her and the hooker that's there, a prostitute, are dressed the same way. They're dressed in the same clothes. Then she, puts makeup on her and then lets her see herself in a mirror that's on the door to see what she looks like. And she's not actually overly offended by what the way she looks. She says she looks like Dolly Parton or some shit like that, right? But she's amazed by the woman put her in a bustier, had her bend over and put her boobs into a bustier and stuff. And she recalls that she always wanted one, but never had the guts to buy one. She had wanted one since she was like a preteen girl, but had never had one. Never would buy one. This woman, here she is now in this bustier with her small boobs looking kind of nice for her. She was liking some of this shit. And then the part that really got screwed up with her for a minute was that John started messing with the prostitute. Yeah, the prostitute started messing with him, and she wasn't liking that shit for a hot minute. So in the movie, you see it play out a bit differently, but she does attack the prostitute. She does attack the chick because what you see in that moment is that she is possessive of John. You don't want to see another woman giving him any pleasure. But in the book, John tells the prostitute, just like he's telling her, tells the prostitute to come over here and show her how to do this, and tells her, you watch, so you learn some of these things. He makes her watch. So things are happening. The prostitute is giving him oral sex and stuff like that, and she's watching that shit. She ain't overly upset until John starts to reach a climax. Then she's upset because you have to remember this whole control in the situation is that she never really does anything to John. She takes no charge sexually when they're together. She doesn't. Things are just done to her. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't have to do anything. So now she's watching a woman give this man pleasure. And he's allowing it. He is submitting to her. Elizabeth don't like that shit. She don't like him seeing him reach a climax like that. And she attacks the prostitute. Now it doesn't go the way she thinks it's going to go. And what ends up happening is she ends up getting subdued. John ends up doing some stuff to her. And then she ends up lying side by side with John on the bed while the prostitute is riding John and bringing him to climax. She doesn't know what that feels like because she's never done it. She's never done it.
And she's going through all these emotions in her mind, and she's feeling all this pain.
Emotion, excitement, all of this shit.
And that's the biggest thing that's where you really kind of feel it was crazy because you're feeling what she's telling you, what she's feeling. And like how you said, she never had the power or the ability to make him climax like that. He climaxed on his own because of what he was doing to her. She never did anything to him.
No, she never made him climax. He climaxed. And Dr. T, you said, seems like you have a few things in common with John. Yeah, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. You the same age as me, Dr. T. You watch this movie now. You will see some things in common. You will. Now, admittedly, I've admitted that I watched this shit as a preteen the first time I saw this movie. And some of those things I admired and I wanted to institute in my life. But I've done some of these things. I've said some of these things. I've had these conversations with people. Even this point why I'm so vivid on this part with this prostitute and stuff and what it means for Liz. I've had a lot of sex with people who really think they got the bomb. But they're just like Liz. They've never done anything to make me climax. Never.
Mm.
They don't have that. They can't even ride you. Can't even do that. They take no initiative. Like the prostitute was taken. So that's why it's interesting to me to have an account of a woman going through that, watching that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've been in adult relationships, you understand the one thing the woman that you currently with don't want to hear shit about is what that last chick did for you. How good she may have done it. And the main thing they worried about is what the next chick gonna do. Instead of, like Toyah was saying, being present in the moment and realizing what your ass is supposed to be doing. It's never about giving that man pleasure. They think the pleasure is in the fact that they let you slide something in them.
Well, think about it. You go back.
That's like 2% of the journey. Okay. You're supposed to be doing some shit here. You should have learned something. All you can do is lay there, pin cushion. That's not exciting at all.
Well, think about that. He didn't care about her ex-husband. All he cared about was her. I'm here about you.
He cared nothing about nobody else at all. She wasn't his whole world, but after work that evening, that was what he was doing. That's exactly what he was doing.
When I saw the movie again a few days ago, when she follows him to his job at the stock exchange, and he doesn't say anything.
No,
I always wonder, like, I said, damn, is he controlling? Is he like this? I said, no, he didn't want her to know about his world. And even in the book, he would meet her for lunch. Because remember the time they met for lunch at work a few times. They would just sit there and have that moment. Because remember, like, he didn't want to talk about his job. He didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it. They said, hey, let's just eat our roast beef sandwiches. He says, I have a half an hour, you have a half an hour.
It's not
let's just talk about what we'll do later on tonight. And she's like, okay. And that one time she's kind of she was in a fog. Well, what's going on? He's like, I don't really want to talk about it. And he just sees her, and like you said, he was staring at her, and like he would stare at her how the way she would eat, and he would look at her, and she's like, what? And she would straighten up a certain kind of way. And I was laughing because how the way he wanted her to sit and how the way he wanted her to look and everything. I was like, okay, that was cool. And then later on at night, they would go through the same routine. That was something that I had to correlate the two. I said, yeah, he didn't care about wanting her to know about his life. He didn't want to know the daily life.
Not work
or anything.
That was not, and this is where the control part comes in. Understand, controlled, not controlling. The control part is his work life was his work life. His after hours life was his after hours life. He didn't want those mixing. The times when he was at home and he got a call about some work stuff or a work colleague he needed to help. In the book, he had to leave one time to help a friend out, right? A co-worker out that didn't do his work. He was irritated. Why was he irritated? Because it was taking time away that he had with Liz. That was his time with her. But he helped out his he left for like an hour or two, helped out his friend, and then came back and made it up to her in a sense. He was very structured, is the word I'm looking for. He was very structured. His work time was his work time. His after hours time was his after hours time. That's what the hell he was doing during that time. He didn't want to be bothered. So in the movie, when she shows up to his job, you get the sense that it's a bad idea that she did that because she's introducing his personal life into work, and you see his complexion change because when he's sitting in there at work at his desk and he's just sat down, he got his computer monitors on and starting to go through the analytics and stuff, and she's strolling there. He looked like Batman sitting at the back computer, like, bitch, what you doing in my cave? And that's how he's looking at her. He doesn't even speak to her. She says a lot to him. He doesn't say a word to her. You are not in the right place right now. He just looks. And she
she
knew
knew
it.
it.
She felt it. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. I should. Yeah, you shouldn't have.
And then you
But
know,
he
what another
stops her,
thing?
goes to lunch, and they have a peaceful little lunch. But in the book, I know he probably would have whooped her ass. Got to the house that night. She got her ass whooped.
Or remember the little caveat she put in? Your receptionist is attractive. You always bring her
Mm-hmm.
lunch. And I was like,
That's that
you had to.
insecurity popping up.
Yep,
And that's
that's why
why
I
he
said
just smiled at it. He didn't respond to it because you don't respond to insecurity from your mate by explaining shit.
exactly.
You don't respond to that. You have to smile at it because you understand that is like Dead Set was saying earlier. That's infantile.
Uh-huh.
That's a child's response. That's a child's response. You don't respond to that shit. He just smiled at her. Like, because it's like saying, "Oh, that's cute. You're going there." Oh, you're worried about that, huh? Okay. Same thing with Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. His secretary was hot, touching her, but she was bound by some of the same kind of rules that Anastasia was. She was on her game, and she followed fucking directions, plain and simple. She wore what he wanted her to wear. She behaved the way she wanted her to wear, and she did what the fuck he told her to do. And that's just her boss. They ain't fucking. Like so.
Or some women, they find that very insecure because, hey,
you got a hot secretary, you could be messing with her. That's the minute you fire your secretary for some shit like that, you giving in to an insecure woman's demands, and it won't stop there.
Exactly.
Never do that shit. Never. I had to learn that shit the hard way. Go ahead. You were saying? I didn't ring for her. Get turned.
What I realized with well, here's one thing that the book did not have, and they had to show a correlation. The old man that was the painter. The correlation with the old man and the painter, he was supposed to be this great artist, and they were trying to get him, and they were going to have a show of his work. And this old guy, people couldn't get a hold of him until Liz goes out. He lives maybe out in the country, out in New York somewhere. She takes a cab out there, and he has this beautiful country home, and she sees where he's working at, and she sees him. He's sitting out, and he just got finished fishing, and she's talking to him, and you see this man, and you think, does he have a mental affliction or anything or anything? But no, this is just a man who just loves to paint. He's not into the ritzy titsy artsy fartsy world. He just loves to paint. And they were showing a fish, and he's looking at the beauty of the fish, and he just loves the fish. And you see the fish flopping, and he's touching it, and you can see it. Now, one of the great things that what film will do, every time you see Elizabeth alone or Elizabeth in the beginning, her light source is always of white, beige, browns, and gold, and usually fall colors. When she gets around John, her colors change from white, gray, and black. When she's around this man, everything's a beautiful fall color with him. Now, the scene before they go to the hotel scene is the old man's art showing. He's a total fish out of water. Hence, that's why you see the fish flopping in the man's hand. These people are coming up to him. Hey, what's going on with him? Hey, and you see all these ritzy titsy Soho people, 84. Everybody you see from punk rockers to rich people. And you see Liz standing there. She's crying because she sees herself in that man. But also she's reeling in her head that she's caught in this dom sub relationship that she doesn't know if she really wants to be in it or she doesn't want to be in it because she's in love, she's infatuated, but also she has insecurities, and this guy has this control on her. But there's a scene where the old man is looking at her and she's looking at him, and they're just staring, and it's like that fliction, like I see you, you see me. And then she runs to the bathroom and she drinks water, and she tries to call John on the phone, and it cuts to the famous ending scene. But I was like, wow,
Yeah.
That ever since when I was a kid watching that, I understood that. I didn't understand what correlation meant, but I'm kind of glad they put that in because the old man was being exploited how the way she was being exploited. But the
Hmm.
thing was, the old man didn't want it. She wanted it,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, she recognized that in that scene, and I got it more clearly um last night when I watched the movie again. I always, when I watched it when I was younger, it was like I just had a vague sense that she sees herself in him, is what I got from it. She sees herself in him. Right. And what it is what I got from it last night when I watched the movie is that she understands, like you were saying, he is the fish out of water. He's in a place where he does not belong with the rest of these people. Right. He is an outsider in this world,
Mhm.
and he's uncomfortable in this world. And she's crying because this is after, in the movie, this is after the hotel situation with John. Right.
Mhm.
She realizes she is like that man. She is out of her depth in this world. She does not fit in this world with him. And she makes the decision that she's going to leave, that she's going to leave him. Now, that's how it happens in the movie. In the book, it does not happen like that. In the book, it is a lot more psychologically traumatic what happens to her. And this is
Mhm.
why I preface, when I read that passage to you guys, preface that you have to remember the names are fake, the situations are real. What actually happened from this shit is that the woman just broke out into a crying fit in John's house one day. She couldn't function. She could not function. She's had this situation in the room with the hooker and some stuff. This has been a while later to live in life, and she cannot function. She's just crying all day. He can't get her to work. He can't get her on the train. He has to take her back upstairs and take her to a hospital. And it turns out that she needs, a couple of months in a mental hospital. She
Mhm.
doesn't see him again. After that point, she doesn't see him again. When she goes into the hospital because she's just crying and whatever and can't stop crying and doesn't know why she's crying, she goes into a hospital. She never sees him again. The next part in that book that you find is that she's with another man, and it's years later. And she still remembers John,
Mhm.
still does, and still feels depressed about that relationship ending. Now, the part that makes it more poignant in this book is that at the end of the book, I'm not going to tell you, ruin the ending or anything like that, because you can see the movie ending and the book ending is completely different, right? But the afterword in this book is by the author's daughter,
Mhm.
and the author's daughter tells you about who her mother really was. She tells you who her mother's real name. And when she found out about this stuff, that her mother writing this book was a closely guarded secret.
Mhm.
But her mother did have these depressive fits a couple of times during her life where she had to go to a hospital and be, you know, her head straight again to be able to come back out into the world and function normally. That this shit really had an impactful psychological effect on her throughout her life. And mostly what it was depression. Because what it said in the book is that you cannot be that overstimulated all the time. And
Mhm.
that's why she had a mental breakdown. Walking away from John was the hardest thing she did. And she was still depressed the rest of her life behind that shit. Still depressed. Even though she married another man, had kids and shit like that, she was still depressed. And the daughter did not know where that was coming from. Like, oh, it's just a thing that happens to mom sometimes.
Mhm.
Until she found out later and actually watched the movie and actually found out from her mother about writing the book and about who John Gray really was and what had actually her mother had actually been through. And then gives her mother's name because her mother had written other books. This was the only one that was not under her real name. So I thought that was a really poignant end to this story to find out, yeah, this woman died, I think 2011 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she was never whole by the time she passed. That these things that happened in this relationship, this 9.5 weeks of her life, changed her fundamentally forever. Forever. And it was just him and her together pushing her boundaries to a point where she felt like she was out of control and didn't know where it would end. She didn't. She didn't know where it would end because he wouldn't stop. And she didn't really feel like she had the control to stop him. She didn't have the self-control to stop him because she liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But she did eventually,
She had a breaking point.
It wasn't her agency that took her away from him in the book like it was in the movie.
Yeah.
It was going into a hospital that took him away from her. He left her alone after that. It's broke.
In the sequel to the movie, well, Kim Basinger never appears in the sequel.
Yeah, too much pain. Yes. Got to be a balance.
Mickey Rourke goes to Europe, and there's a woman who found out that got kind of obsessed with Mickey Rourke and also obsessed with Kim Basinger's character, Elizabeth. And come to find out, Elizabeth, after dealing with Mickey Rourke, checked herself into a sanitarium because the 9.5 weeks that they had messed with her.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth, in the sequel, wrote a book for cathartic reasons called 9.5 Weeks.
Now,
but Elizabeth, because the turmoil was so much to her, she committed suicide. So,
well, this is how the book 9.5 Weeks was written. The daughter explains it. That was written when the mother had went into mental hospital for treatment. When she came out, she wrote this book, and it was a way of her dealing with and speaking to what she had actually been through. That's where the book came from. It came out of her getting therapy.
Yep.
So them putting that in the second movie is art imitating life in a sense. She didn't commit suicide, but most of that other stuff is what the daughter says in her account in the afterward. Yeah, this is what my mother did. That's true shit. So Rainfire, I got some good points in here. What did Dr. T say? The ending you described reminds me of the end of Streep's character life in The Bridges of Madison County. I also think it became her alpha imprint.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't see The Bridges of Madison County, so I can't speak to that. What I can say is this ending is echoed in 50 Shades of Grey in the second book, or is it the first? It might be the first one, where one of his old Christian Grey's old subs starts stalking Anastasia, and she's fucking crazy. She's fucking crazy because then you get the other side of it. Like, okay, in 9.5 weeks, Elizabeth is taken away from John Grey. Well, what happens after that? John Grey doesn't see her anymore. Well, apparently he would just get another woman, right? Okay. Did Liz ever see him with the new woman? Because they still live in the same city. This plays that up in 50 Shades of Grey, where you see a failed sub who's kind of crazy, but was getting help, coming back, and she want to go after the new chick. She kind of want to kill the new chick. Like, bruh, look, some doors might not need to be open. You might not be the right person to open that door and walk in that room. You have to really ask yourself some damn questions. So I'd have to see the Bridges of Madison County. I'll probably check it out because of that. But yeah, that was Liz's imprint was John Gray at that point because he took her way far. Yes. Nobody else was ever going to take her that far. Nobody. And that's why she was depressed. If you've been up to those heights like that, everything falls short in comparison when you've been to those heights. Nobody would press you like that. That was the only person. And that's why she was depressed. Not that the man that she married after John wasn't good to her, didn't give her children, or none of that stuff. She had some happiness, but it wasn't to that level. He could never take her back to that level. And that's what she was depressed about. Like when you've fallen from heaven and you can't go back. Everything is pale in comparison. They hate showing female complicity in brokenness. I think this is why they don't show Harley Quinn the way she originally was in the 90s Batman series. She now has to beat Joker with her agency. Yeah, this is bullshit. Harley Quinn is a much better character when you understand that Harleen Quinzel was a psychotherapist and she knows exactly what the fuck it is she's doing. And she enjoys it. She enjoys it. Not that old Joker's abusing her. They abuse each other. When she got into the comic books, what you see is Harley and Joker will fight each other. They will. When Joker was dead for a time and Harley went mess with Deadshot, and then Joker came back, they had a knockdown, drag out fight. And it wasn't Joker just beating the shit out of Harley. Harley was giving him the what for too. Because Joker was pissed. Bitch, you moved on. What the fuck is wrong with you? You were dead. Yeah, I'm always dead. Tell me shit. You my woman. They was having an issue. They had a knockdown, drag out fight in Suicide Squad. It didn't go the way that empowerment thing would tell you it went. So no, that's what makes the Harleen and Joker relationship more interesting in a sense. She knows what she's doing. And she enjoys it. That feminism getting in there and trying to turn her into a female Deadpool, I don't really care for that one. That's the one I don't care about.
That's when you're trying to make them interesting.
Yeah. It sounds like she was going through withdrawals. I would say she was going through withdrawals.
Definitely.
But hyper stimulating anything in your body will cause it to break down. Where you cannot how do you say it, manage your moods and stuff like that. That's what that crying shit was about. She could not manage her moods anymore without some kind of help. They didn't say they gave her medication, but that's what you have to do in that situation. It was overstimulated. It's like being on drugs. Yeah, it might be fun for the time, but you cannot live at that height. You can't. It will fuck you up to where you will need stuff to moderate that for you. Because you can't do it yourself anymore. It's too open. So yeah, she was going through withdrawals, and that's why the dopamine. That's why later in life she could manage it sometimes, and then there were times when she flipped the fuck out again. Needed to, go back and get another readjustment.
You know what I liked about the movie, especially for it being the 80s, when she leaves, well, the ending scene where you actually see the vulnerability of John when he wants her to stay.
You do.
You actually see his vulnerability. And also it's a great cinematic shot where if it's only a 3/4 shot where you see him when he's talking, and then on the reverse, you see a 3/4 shot of her.
Right.
But you see her gain a little bit of strength. She's listening to him. And when he tells him a little bit about his life, she said, "It's too late, John."
It's too late, yeah.
And she walks out, but as you see her walking, you see her crying.
Struggling.
And she's crying, and you see her, This is where you see the vulnerability of a person, and this goes to anybody in the chat. If anybody has broken up, I don't care who you are, man or woman, this is where you see the vulnerability of when you break up. Almost anybody, if you've broken up with somebody that you cared about, or no matter how the way the relationship is, you pour your emotion in, you feel her pain. You feel her, and she's walking. And as a kid, when I saw this, I was like, damn. But then she's walking, but then they show another scene. They kind of bookended because the beginning of the movie, she's walking in the crowd to go to work, and she's happy. In the end, she's walking in a crowd of people, and she's crying. And then they show her that she's just walking around New York. And at the very end scene, it's dark, and she's walking, and she turns and looks over her shoulder, and you can see her makeup is running, and it just goes to black. And I was like, wow, that's a perfect way of capturing a woman who's broken, that broke up out of a relationship, that she poured it all on the table, the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the vulnerability of John when he says, if I count to 50, will you please come back? And you see him, he's walking. And there's a good acting with both of them, because you see John, for the first time, he doesn't have the smug look. He doesn't have the confident swagger. He can see, like, he's holding his neck, which shows a sign of vulnerability where he's holding himself. If you ever know anything about body language, and he's standing there in his eyes, and he's stooped over a little bit like a kid, and he's talking, and he's walking back and forth, and he's counting, but they don't play any, you don't hear any words. They're just showing scenes of her walking, him in his hallway, walking back and forth, and he's looking at the door. He's not going after her.
Yeah, he's walking. He has his hands in his pocket, and he's walking back to his bedroom he has a long hallway in his apartment to the front door. And once she walks out that front door, it's an interplay of two cuts. It's a cut of her walking away from his apartment, out the building, out the house, down the street, and him walking away from the door slowly, trying to count the time that she's going to come back. And it's sadness on his part, but also he's done this before. Is what it is. And that's why it's like, when you come back, if I count to 50. And he just starts counting to 50. He knows she's not coming back, but you see the pain in him that he's going through this again. And he's going through it with Liz, who he actually loved. He did love her. This was just the way he loved her, right? She loved him. She's walking away from him. She's crying for her reasons. He's not crying, but you see him internalizing this in his own way, to where he's losing a little bit of that control, where he wants to touch on things, but he doesn't. He puts his hands down and tries to comport himself, but you hear the sadness in his tone as he walks slowly back to that bedroom. He knows she's not coming back.
And when she goes to the door, remember, he comes up to her, but you can see he wants to touch her. It's like they're 2 feet, but she kind of backs up, and he doesn't want to touch her, but he looks at her, and he says to her, you don't have to go. She says, no, John, I have to go. And then she opens the door and he goes out. And I was like, wow. And just seeing how the way Kim Basinger walks. First of all, you see her, she has this overcoat on, and she's walking, and the way she's just so sad, the overcoat is enveloping her. And you see her that she's walking, and the day is sunny. Her clothes are light. The only thing that's dark is the overcoat. And it's a remnants of the darkness that she just left.
Well, here's the funny part. I would say that I think the overcoat was his.
That's what I said, because the overcoat is bigger than her.
Yeah, bigger than her. It's his overcoat. Because she was wearing a dark overcoat in the beginning, too, when she was walking.
Yeah.
But at the end, she makes a point of going through the closet and grabbing certain things. And she tells him when she leaves that she'll send somebody to get her stuff. Get her things, right? But she leaves. I think that's his coat she has. She took one of his coats out of the closet, and she keeps that and leaves. And it's just the pain of having to leave something you really don't want to, but you know you need to.
Yes.
And that's what she's doing. That's what that walk is, because she's not sure of her steps when she's leaving the apartment in the elevator, going out the front door, stuff like that. But as she gets further away, she gains more speed in her walking. That her walking pace gets back to being normal, right? And this is just the movie ending, mind y'all. This is not how the book ends. This is the movie ending. But while his stride back to the bedroom is really slow, her stride away from his house actually picks up in speed, right? So that's why, she's amongst people. She's not smiling, she's crying, because she's leaving a place of some sort of bliss for her. It's painful.
Yeah,
It's a painful situation. She doesn't really want to leave him, but she knows she needs to. She is the fish out of water. She got to get out of there because she's out of control. She knows it. She needs to maintain some order for herself. And Rainfire, I did see that book. That's the one I was talking about, the Suicide Squad. So let me just close that out with a final thought on this, Malaika, and then I can bring up some of these other people that want to come up and had this little chat with us about some geek shit.
At 53, that book was talking about, and even the movie, they were talking about dom sub relationships. And what you and what Toya talked about, really, it's something that is normal, that happens, but it was showing a dynamic in relationships from this woman's perspective, something that happened in her life. But we all go through certain things, and it was a very interesting portrayal through both mediums, and even with a modern interpretation of it through 50 Shades of Grey. I love talking about subjects like this because it's talking about the human experience. And we're talking about sexual experiences, like you said, and I'm glad we had a very mature conversation about it, but it was exploring something deeper within these two people, but it's specifically with this woman because she had went through something, and she had bore her soul in this relationship, but then also it helped us explore something within us. Like, okay, 80s, it was taboo that we talked about certain things, but this movie became a cult classic because it showed sexual things, and it made these two actors into great stars because of this. But at the same time, what is the deeper meaning beyond the tongue-in-cheek sex and the certain things? It was a unique relationship. We're talking about, why is this man acting this way? Like you said, there has to be a point what made John Gray become John Gray, and we didn't explore it. We explored it a little bit with Christian Grey, which is cool, but still today, in the book and in the movie, John Gray's background is still a mystery, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But I love this.
In the book, there's a little bit more given earlier than later. In the movie, it's later. In the book, it's earlier. But he's still mostly a mystery about, most of his real background. It's not that he lies. He shares little with her about it. But yeah, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead and finish.
No, I said, and I love having conversations like this through media. And I agree. I would love to do another conversation with 50 Shades of Grey. I saw all three of the movies. I just have to read the 3 books now.
Yeah. The books go quick. Trust me, the books go quick. I had the books on Kindle, digital. They go pretty quick. Right. But it'll be good for me to go back and go through the books again, because I think I didn't finish. I don't remember the ending of number 3 completely. 50 Shades Freed. I don't remember the ending of that completely. So it'll be good for me to go back through those and get that totally written into the hard drive, the wetware hard drive, and then watch the movies again just for some fun. Because I did see 50 Shades of Grey as being really pedestrian, but at the time I came upon those books, I was looking at it more psychologically than anything else. And Christian Grey ended up being a really interesting character, and how he functions and how his life is ended up being a lot more interesting to me in my late 30s, early 40s. It was more, I can identify with this person a bit. and how does this situation work, as opposed to I'm just titillated by the fact that he had sex and tied up a chick. Who gives a fuck? Everybody has sex. It's not that big of a deal. So that's where I was on it. But I want to say to you, thank you, brother, for bringing this, sparking the conversation and actually bringing the idea forth with me. Like, we should do a show on it. I agreed, and I'm glad that we were able to find Toyah, a female who wanted to dive into it, read this material, go through this as well, and discuss it with us in a mature way, to where it's not just like I said, just sitting up here sniggling and giggling about shit and not actually touching on any of the issues or the ideas that are in play here, because apparently two grown folks was having sex. So we can't see anything else besides that. So I appreciate you being there for that.
I thank you for that. I thank you for allowing me. Well, first of all, I thank you for listening to me and getting back to me, calling when this first idea hit me. Because remember, I was trying to call you, and you finally got back, and we were talking on the phone. You know, it was probably like 11 or 12 your time, but it was like going on 2-3 o'clock a.m. my time. And you know me, I get very long-winded, but you know how
got a lot of ideas pouring out.
But that's how the way I think. But you understand that's how the way I think. But I'm like you. I just don't go by the movie. I go by the book, the movie, the remake, whatever else is. I go see what's on YouTube. I go see what other stuff, what other people have rights. It's just about, okay, gathering information, but what is the real story here beside? I mean, we're grown people. It's not just about kinky sex. What is really going on here? What is the story?
Yeah.
And then when I read the book, I was like, oh, it's deeper. It's a memoir of her life in this point in time. And also, they were saying at this point in time, you could not really talk about dom sub sex. And it really didn't have that big of a title back then in the 70s.
Wasn't really that terminology on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing Toyah and myself up and just giving me a chance. And we're having a mature, intimate, respectful conversation. And it's still in the geekdom era because, like you said, how many Black people, for example, 2 Black men and a Black woman will talk about something that will be considered white kinky sex?
Yeah, some white taboo shit. Like, I don't make judgments on a lot of things that people can do in relationships on their own life. That's your choice. Your sexual proclivities are your business. They're not mine. Right? Unless you invite me along on that journey. Otherwise, it's not my business. I don't necessarily care. But anything that I see 2 consenting adults agree to should be fine. They adults, right? They consented to do these things, then it shouldn't be a problem. So if you hear about it like, oh my God, he dressed up like a schoolgirl and was getting spanked. Did he agree to that shit, or did she make him do it? Then if he agreed to that and that's what gets him off, that's his business, dude. That's between the 2 of them. That ain't none of your goddamn business. That don't mean you get to in the real world tease him about the shit or treat him like, look, you'll find out something different, because what he liked to do in his spare time is something completely different from what he does on his work time. Don't get it fucked up. Yeah, don't get it fucked up. So some of this, as we know commonly now, is dom sub relationship stuff, actually does have a place. It actually happens all the time. You just don't always call it that, because to greater or lesser degrees, it always happens in any relationship that you're fucking in. There's 2 people meeting today somewhere in the world. 2 people are meeting right now. And in the course of that relationship, in the course of that meeting, one will be imposing something on the other and bringing the other person into their world a little bit, trying to figure out how they interact, how they will work together, sexually, conversationally, relationship-wise, just in life. It will always happen. And they will get into some stuff sexually that you may look at like, oh, that's pedestrian, or wow, that's a little bit out there. Not your goddamn business.
Mhm.
But if they're involved in it and they enjoy it and it's consent between the two of them, what do you have to say about it? What does your opinion matter? Doesn't. Does not. Unless they invite you into that shit. Then your opinion matters. Other than that, it doesn't. And it's not your business. So, like I said, I don't judge people, kinks, like Toya says many a times. She don't kink shame. I don't necessarily kink shame either. You do what the fuck it is that you do.
Mhm.
It's not my business until I engage in it with you. Then it's my business. Other than that, knock yourself out, play safe, and don't hurt anybody. So I appreciate Toya and Malaika for joining me on this, and I appreciate you guys in the audience for actually listening to this. That is not traditionally a so much geek topic, but like I said, the title of the show is not "We Just Talk Geek Stuff." It's called The Hero's Journey. And in any journey you take, you are usually the hero or the villain. It's always about your journey, your travel. Our travels took us through the novel by Elizabeth McNeill, 9.5 weeks, in the movie, 9.5 weeks, and comparing the two to each other and to movies that came along afterwards in the same vein. I thank these two people for joining me on this panel. You guys for watching this shit. No, it probably won't do 1,000 views. Who gives a shit? I don't. I like having the conversation. So that's where I find the enjoyment. That's where I find my pickle tickled. And that's what I find more interesting. So thank you, Malaika. Thank you, everybody else. I'm going to do a short cutoff. So if I clip this, I can clip it. And then I'm going to bring up some of these other guests. So give me half a second to do that, just to make a hard cut for myself. And I will see you guys in a second.